Hi, welcome back to the channel. This week we're studying a new series where we're going back to basics. We're going to create a track from start to finish in Ableton using only native Ableton devices, or if they're not useful, then free ones. I will then, at the end of each week, upload the project to my Gumroad for you to download in order to follow along. I should add that any third-party plugins that I do use won't be able to be attached with the project, so I'll need to put a link in for those so you can just download them separately, but that's no big issue. So without further ado, let's get started. I will just explain what we currently have, which isn't really much at all, but just so you're on the same page. We have a MIDI track here, which is completely blank, as you can see. We have that then going into a group, which is called kick and bass. When the bass is done, that will also be in this group. They then feed into a pre-master track, which is just a way that I personally like working. It's just a preference. This is essentially where I'll have all my master output plugins like a limiter and compressor, EQ, whatever else. And then that goes then to the master. Then on the master, I have Sonarworks, but that will obviously be removed before I send it. That's just for monitoring here. And then the pre-master, I have going 100% wet to the third send, which is my OBS audio recording. Again, that won't be relevant to you. And then the two sends are exactly the same as default. So A is the delay and B is the stock reverb. But seeing as we're doing a kick for now, they aren't even part of the equation. So let's get started. I like to remain organized, so let's call this kick. Let's change this tempo from a paltry 120 up to something more palatable, 150. Let's now go and put in the MIDI. I'm going to put in 8th notes. So as you can see, it's currently set to 16th. We can just change that so you can visualize it a little bit better. 1/8 it's set to now. Track is in F sharp. So let's put that there. Let's move that down a few octaves. It's a kick, so let's make F sharp 0. Put that across on 4/4. Play this back. And we don't have anything yet because there is no instrument yet. So let's choose our trusty operator. We're going to use this for the kick. Let's play this back. Nothing special whatsoever. And that is because all we have currently is just a basic sine wave, which is selected here. Let's turn off the first 3 operators. So we're just using the bottom one. The volume is down, so it doesn't make a difference. I just like to keep it clean so that we know we're only focusing on the bottom one. Let's turn off the filter. We don't want any processing there. We're going to do it all in the envelopes, or in the pitch envelopes. And because it's a kick, we want to max out the range, the pitch range. So let's turn on the pitch envelope, which you can see here. We can turn that up. Now we're getting somewhere already. Let's turn down the sustain because we want this range to be even greater. So turn it down to 48. And then we can turn up the transpose. You can hear at the end of the note, there's that, well, it's very lasery, but you can hear that annoying little bubble thing at the end. So let's max out the release time. Then if we click on the release label here, we can turn the slope down like so. What we're going to do now is add our first free third-party effect, and that is from Bombshanker. I will put the link in so you can download, and it is called Oscilloscope, and that is a oscilloscope. So you can see it's just a sine wave, which is then tailing out. Let's now add a tuner. This is a stock Ableton plugin. If we play it back now, you can see the pitch coming into the tuner there. It's currently around F, but that's because of the pitch slope. We'll fix that later. But you can see if we turn off the pitch envelope, you can see it's just a fixed sine on F sharp. So let's put this back on. So now we have our fundamentals in place. We need to start shaping the kick. We can adjust the decay now. And you can see once we've done that, the pitch starts to rectify itself back to F sharp. This is all just obviously to taste. So you can see that the finest of touches makes such a big difference. You have to be very precise with it. But I wouldn't say there's anything scientific. It's really just a case of getting that decay to sound as you want. And one thing to emphasize at this point is it's very rare that you will create the kick and it will stay like that for the rest of the track. So what we're going to do is we're going to create something that we really like, but then I have no hesitation to say that we'll definitely come back to it at some point and then configure it a little bit more once the track really starts to progress. So my point is, don't spend weeks and weeks and weeks getting the perfect kick, because it will change anyway. Get it to, let's say, 90%, and that is certainly good enough to start working on the rest of the track. So that's sounding quite good. I'm happy with the bass sound of that. I say bass, I mean the fundamental, not frequency bass. But if we look at the scope now, you can see it's just a sine wave all the way through. And what we want is we want that kind of fishy shape, where we want a little bit of a duck just after the neck of the fish and then to balloon up. And the reason for that is just to give, you don't want the boominess all the way through. You want a sharp attack and then you want the swell for the bass. So if you think about what a kick is, it's essentially just a pitched sine wave, which is what we created here in this pitch envelope, and it goes from a high frequency very quickly all the way down to the fundamental of the bass. So what that means is that it's high frequency here, low frequency there. So somewhere around here is the mid-range. So if we cut this mid-range with an EQ, then that will obviously create a bit of a dip in the amplitude there. So let's try that. Let's go to our audio effects. Let's go to EQ, EQ 8. This is our mid here, or our low mid. Obviously, we need to put that before the scope. So you can see it's cutting the tail now because we're in the bass region. But if we sweep this up, you will see this dip become further and further up towards the neck of our little fish, like so. I know I'm describing it as a fish and we're looking at visually, but don't use the EQ like that. Absolutely use your ears. I was just explaining conceptually what happens when you move this EQ. So let's ignore this visualization. Let's do it by ear. Let's change the Q a bit. So that's sounding okay. We might come back to that, or in fact, I'm sure we will. Now, in terms of the duration of the kick, if we go to our MIDI notes, you can see when we play this back, this is set to 1/4. So let's switch it to a bar now. And you can see that our kick is incredibly long. So this is where the next kick happens, obviously. So in Psytrance, we have the kick, bass, bass, and bass. So this is really going to interfere with our first bass note, and even into our second, and even into our fourth one also. So that's way too long. We want the kick to finish around 1/16th, which is 1.5 times the 16th. So that will be there we want the kick to finish. Again, I emphasize use your ears, but that's as a guide. That's where we want it. So part of the reason why our kick is so long is we have the MIDI ending at 1/8, but then we have this massive release here. So let's go back and adjust our release. We have 400 milliseconds, which is way too long for the release. Turn it down. And you can see that's reduced it quite significantly. But now we go back and we can adjust our MIDI. Let's put this onto 1/16th so we can see, and let's dial this back a little bit. So now you can see it's ending just before 1/16th because we've turned this down to less than 1/16th. So what we can do now is we can go back and we can then increase our release to get that to tail off around the 1/16 dotted. So there we go, that's looking quite good now. Let's also add a high cut to the EQ now, just to give a bit of flexibility later. I think it's a bit too bright just for my personal taste. So let's now select all of this, right click and do group. Now that's converted it into a instrument rack, which then allows us to create macros. So the first macro is we're going to map this to our frequency here and then map. Let's call this brightness. So now what happens is when we turn this knob, it will shift this EQ to get brighter or duller. Obviously we never want it down like this, that's just crazy. We want the minimum to be around there, let's say, which is, let's say 2000 kilohertz. So let's go to our map here. In the minimum, change that to 2000. Unclick map, and now we have the range set. And also the benefit of doing it this way is because when the rack is minimized, then you're purely using your ear at that point. You're not influenced by what you're seeing in the EQ here. Let's go check our scope again. I think I want to shape the kick a bit more. So let's go to, we want to grab a shaper, modulator, shaper. Let's put that on here. Now let's add a utility. We need to get rid of the search here. Utility. Put that just after the shaper, like so. We can even group them because we know that they're together. What we're going to do is we're going to map this shaper to the amplitude here. So click on map, click on gain, and if we play this back, you can see that it's going all the way to max amplitude, which is what we don't want. So instead of going all the way to maximum, let's change this to 50. So you can see it's only going to unity here, up to 0. But this curve is nothing like what we want. So let's add another one. Put this up to there. We don't want the first one, so we can get rid of that. However, once we've done that, you can see that we've lost our transient, which is not good news for a kick. So let's adjust the phase to dial that slightly back. Just a touch. We want just enough so you can hear it again. There we go. So the reason for adding this shaper was to ensure that the kick absolutely stops halfway through the second bass note. So, which is, as I said, the 1/16 dotted. So let's add a separate node here. Turn off the snap. So you can see by doing that, we've sculpted that kick perfectly so it drops right at the end, or right in the middle of the first bass. Now maybe we can go back and further adjust the release. And what that will do, as you can see there, it's kind of swelling out or ballooning the tail of the fish. We know it's definitely going to end where we said because of the shaper, but we're just making the body of this kick a bit more round, if you like. So if we take it all the way back, it's very short, but then we increase it, it's kind of swells out a bit. I think there is sounding quite good. And now if we look at the level of the kick, it is peaking at -14. So let's add another utility onto the end. Let's put this within the rack still. And then what we're going to do is we're going to turn this up by 4. So the reason being is that then this will max out at minus 10 dB. Or it's minus 9.97, just because I like to be very, very particular. It's 3.97. Now, obviously, you can do this directly in the fader. I like to keep the kick and bass at unity, and they will be minus 10 and minus 12, respectively. We're only using one of these oscillators in operator, and there's no panning or there's no chorus or anything going on, so it should still be mono. But still, in this utility, just click mono, just so we know that it definitely is. Because we always want our kick and bass to be mono. We can now tidy up these macros here. We can do reduce. We only have one macro currently in use. So let's take it down to one knob just to clean it up a bit. So there we have it, the very, very start of our track. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to put this onto my Gumroad for you to download. If it asks you for money, just do 0 in the amounts field. I've had that before. People have complained that they need to enter an amount. That's not the case. Just put 0 and it's absolutely fine. You will need Ableton Live 11 Suite for this. So for those who don't have Suite, you can just really follow along. Oscilloscope is free to everyone. So as I said, I'll put the link to that so you can go and download it. And then once you've downloaded that, the project should open exactly the same way as this. And I'll be back in a week or so with the bass, and then we'll take it from there. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.